When looking at Britain on a modern map, it may appear to be only a small island nation limited to the British Isles. However, this view hides a far larger global legacy that still exists today. Britain continues to exercise authority over 14 overseas territories spread across the world. These range from Gibraltar at the entrance of the Mediterranean Sea to the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic Ocean. These territories are remnants of what was once the largest empire in human history. They serve as reminders of Britain's extraordinary rise to global power. At its height, just over a century ago, the British Empire covered nearly 1/4 of the Earth's land surface. It ruled over almost 1/3 of the world's population, spanning every inhabited continent. This vast domain earned it the famous description as the empire on which the sun never sets. The sheer scale of British control raises an important historical question. How did such a small island nation achieve such dominance? The answer lies in centuries of political, military, and economic development. The roots of the British Empire extend back long before Britain formally existed as a unified state. For much of medieval history, the dominant power in the British Isles was the Kingdom of England. England possessed a relatively strong economy and an increasingly capable military. Over time, it extended control over Wales and large parts of Ireland. Scotland, however, remained fiercely independent and successfully resisted English invasions for centuries. By the late 16th century, England had begun to look beyond Europe for opportunity and expansion. Under Queen Elizabeth I, English explorers were commissioned to claim new lands overseas. Figures such as Sir Francis Drake and Sir Martin Frobisher explored distant regions and claimed territory for England. However, these early efforts focused more on exploration than settlement. As a result, England's first colonial ventures struggled to take hold. One of the earliest attempts at English colonization was the Roanoke colony in North America in 1585. This settlement failed mysteriously when its inhabitants disappeared without explanation. Despite this setback, England continued to pursue overseas trade aggressively. Elizabeth I granted royal charters to joint stock companies to monopolize trade in specific regions. Among the most important were the Levant Company and the East India Company, founded in 1600. In 1603, the English throne passed to James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England. This united the crowns of England and Scotland under one monarch, though both kingdoms remained politically separate. James sought to expand England's overseas ambitions through structured colonial systems. Colonies were governed as crown colonies, charter colonies, or proprietary colonies, each with different degrees of autonomy. These models shaped English imperial administration for decades. An often overlooked development during this period was the plantation of Ulster in Ireland. Protestant settlers from England and Scotland were relocated to Northern Ireland. This program established a model of organized colonization and land control. Many leaders involved in Ulster later played key roles in founding colonies in the Americas. The plantation system became a blueprint for future British colonial expansion. Throughout the 17th century, England expanded across North America and the Caribbean. Some colonies were newly founded, while others were seized from rival European powers. New York, for example, was captured from the Dutch in 1665. England also strengthened its trading presence in Africa and Asia through fortified trading posts. These developments greatly increased England's wealth and influence. A major driver of this economic growth was the transatlantic slave trade. The Royal African Company, founded in 1660, became a leading participant in this brutal system. Enslaved Africans were transported to the Americas to work on plantations. Although immensely profitable, this trade caused immense human suffering. It would later become one of the most controversial legacies of the British Empire. Scotland also attempted to establish overseas colonies during this period. However, most Scottish colonial ventures failed due to poor planning and lack of resources. The most disastrous effort was the Darien Scheme of 1698 in Panama. The project aimed to control trade routes between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Disease, starvation, and Spanish attacks caused its collapse. Plunging Scotland into the failure of the Darien Scheme convinced many Scots that economic survival depended on union with England. Political changes following the Glorious Revolution further pushed both nations toward unity. In 1707, the Acts of Union were passed, creating the Kingdom of Great Britain. This political union allowed Scotland to share in England's expanding colonial trade. It marked a turning point in imperial history. During the 18th century, Britain became involved in a series of major European wars. These conflicts were fought both in Europe and across colonial territories worldwide. Victories in wars such as the War of the Spanish Succession brought Britain new territories. These included Gibraltar, Newfoundland, and parts of eastern Canada. Britain was rapidly emerging as a global imperial power. The British East India Company played a crucial role in imperial expansion in Asia. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, the company gained control over Bengal. This victory transformed the company into a powerful political and military force. It expanded its influence across the Indian subcontinent through conquest and alliances. India soon became central to Britain's imperial wealth. The 7 Years' War proved decisive for British dominance. Britain defeated France in North America, capturing Quebec in 1759. This effectively ended French colonial ambitions on the continent. Britain also gained territories in the Caribbean and Florida from Spain. By 1763, Britain was the world's leading colonial and maritime power. Naval supremacy and global trade were the foundations of the British Empire. Control of the seas allowed Britain to protect its trade routes and colonies. Wealth poured into Britain through taxation of imported goods. However, disputes over taxation soon created tension with Britain's American colonies. These tensions would lead to revolution. The American colonies resented being taxed without representation in Parliament. Protests escalated throughout the 1760s and 1770s. In 1775, armed conflict broke out between Britain and the colonies. The following year, the colonies declared independence as the United States of America. After 8 years of war, Britain was defeated. The loss of the American colonies forced Britain to rethink its imperial strategy. Focus shifted toward Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Explorers like Captain James Cook charted new territories. Australia and New Zealand were claimed for Britain. Australia became a penal colony beginning in 1788. British influence also expanded in North America as Pacific Northwest. Explorers mapped coastal and inland regions, opening them to trade. The fur trade became especially important. These expansions strengthened British control over Canada. Britain was once again extending its global reach. The Napoleonic Wars posed a major threat to British dominance. Britain responded by investing heavily in its navy. The decisive Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 secured British naval supremacy. Although Admiral Nelson was killed, the victory prevented invasion. British naval dominance would last more than a century. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, Britain gained even more territories. These included Malta, Ceylon, Mauritius, and the Cape Colony. Many Caribbean colonies relied on slave labor for sugar production. However, economic changes and abolitionist pressure led Britain to end the slave trade in 1807. Slavery itself was abolished in 1834. The 19th century marked Britain's imperial century. India became the empire's most valuable possession. British control expanded across Southeast Asia and China. Singapore and Hong Kong became vital trading hubs. British economic and military influence reached unprecedented levels. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 challenged British rule. After suppressing the rebellion, Britain dissolved the East India Company. India was placed under direct crown rule in 1858. It became known as the jewel in the crown of the empire. British authority was now firmly established. Britain also competed with Russia and Central Asia during the Great Game. Conflicts like the Crimean War demonstrated Britain's determination to protect its interests. The war ended in Russian defeat. Britain secured Cyprus and maintained influence in the Middle East. Strategic control was key to imperial survival. Africa became a major focus of expansion in the late 19th century. Britain gained vast territories during the scramble for Africa. Control stretched from Egypt to South Africa. Infrastructure projects such as railways symbolized imperial ambition. Britain was shaping entire continents. Technological advances supported imperial control. The global telegraph network allowed instant communication across the empire. Britain also dominated global finance and trade. Even countries outside the empire were economically influenced by British power. The empire was both territorial and economic. Some colonies began demanding greater autonomy. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand became self-governing dominions. Ireland also sought independence but faced resistance. These demands reflected changing attitudes toward imperial rule. The empire was beginning to evolve. World War I placed enormous strain on the empire. Millions of troops from colonies and dominions fought for Britain. Although victorious, Britain emerged financially weakened. The war accelerated calls for independence across the empire. The foundations of imperial decline were laid. Between the world wars, nationalist movements grew stronger. Ireland gained independence in 1921. World War II temporarily delayed decolonization. However, the cost of the war left Britain exhausted. It could no longer maintain global control. From the 1940s to the 1970s, most colonies gained independence. This process became known as the Wind of Change. Many new nations joined the Commonwealth. Some retained the British monarch as head of state. The empire was ending peacefully for the most part. The final symbolic end came in 1997 with the return of Hong Kong to China. Although the empire is gone, its legacy remains. English is now a global language. British institutions and culture continue to influence the world. Modern Britain reflects the diversity of its imperial past.